him and fell into his arms, an old African white-headed man and an old light-skinned American man, white-headed, and they began to weep and to cry and, yes, to dance in African fashion around that churchyard. And in between the laughter and the tears, Akomeah said to my uncle, "Oh, missionary, it was worth it all. Today there are churches everywhere." And indeed there are. I had the privilege of preaching the 75th anniversary of our Assemblies of God of Burkina Faso several years ago with 100,000 people in the closing rally, and the president of the country sitting in the front row. And it would be, I told the story I've just told you, and I said, in the unique providence of God, I have the opportunity to finish the sermon which my cousin began with his dying words 60 years ago. Don't follow Satan's road, follow Jesus' road. It's the road that leads to heaven. Exceedingly more. Able to do immeasurably more. When my aunt and uncle laid their oldest son into the ground at Tengudagu, the devil, I'm sure, was whispering in their ears, "It's all over. It's all over. You might as well go home. God has failed you." But they trusted in the God who had called them to Africa, and he was able to do immeasurably more. And the God who called them to Africa is the God who has called you to America, and he can do through you immeasurably more. He can do immeasurably more through your children. I want to say to you that America needs the African church to come and help us. This culture is in trouble. You know it's in trouble. We are afflicted with an epidemic of drugs and pornography and adultery and divorce, and don't have family values and respect for elders. God has sent you to America to help this country get back on its feet and be a nation that serves Jesus Christ with its whole heart and soul and mind. God has sent you here, and I'm thrilled you're here. The Assemblies of God is thrilled you're here. He can do immeasurably more. I think of something that my uncle told me at one point. It was in the early days. In fact, before I get into that story, I have to remember another one of our missionaries who translated the Bible into one of the West African languages, and did it by manually typing the Bible on mimeograph stencils. Since most of you are too young to remember, that was before the copy machine, folks. And the African preachers would wait on their bicycles to get the latest book of the Bible to go preach in the villages. They lost their little boy too, their firstborn in Africa. I went by his grave and in Ouagadougou, just saw the simple heading, Billy Hall, 6 months. I came back to the United States and I ran into his mother, who was a retired missionary. She was then 93 years of age. And I said to her, Sister Hall, I said, that must have been a very difficult experience for you. After 30 years in Africa, they had translated the entire Bible into one of the major languages. I said, when you lost your boy, that must have been a very difficult experience. Tears came to her eyes as she remembered the event. She said it was. She said, but, you know, as we were there and our windows were open, we didn't have air conditioning, and our boy was so sick, we could hear our African friends outside who were not yet followers of Jesus talking night after night, saying, wonder if the missionary will go home if their boy dies. Will they feel their God has failed them? And when our little boy died and we buried him there and we stayed, there was no more important thing that ever happened to us that bonded us to the African people, because at that time, almost every African family had lost a child. We stayed, and God gave us strength, and God gave us grace. And 30 years later, we had the Bible completely translated. And today, there are multiplied millions of people that are reading those scriptures because God did immeasurably more. Sometimes we get very confused by the circumstances we're in and think that, you know, then I'm sure, Pastor Bismark and Linda, when you came here with no people, I would suspect that there were some times when the enemy wanted to make you feel like, what in the world are you doing? Pastor Bismark was telling me last night when he picked me up, and you all know this, but he was a tailor in Ghana. And I can tell by looking at all the clothes you're wearing that he has made all of them, because this is the most dressed up crowd I've been in, and I don't know when. Well, I tell you, you have style. He didn't have some of the advantages that others have had in terms of background or preparation, but he had a great advantage, and that is God called him, and God equipped him. God put this on his heart, and God is doing through him immeasurably more. And he wants to do that through you and through me as well, immeasurably more. Well, I started a story, and with this I close. My uncle Paul Weidman was ministering in northern Togo, and they were just out and doing evangelism work, and since the Bible had not yet been completely translated, what they would do with new converts, they didn't have a Bible to give them, and they just had a very simple mimeograph machine. So when a new convert would come, they would at the close of the meeting, when they'd pray the sinner's prayer, they would give them a sheet. It was called a bitte sheet for the word believe. Bitte being the word believe. Not sure what language that is. And it would only have one Bible verse, and the new convert was told to go away and memorize that verse and then come back the next week, and they would receive their second bitte sheet, their second believe sheet. So this young man came forward and was given the first bitte sheet, which is from Acts 16:31. Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and you will be saved, you and your whole household. But when the next week came, he didn't show up. And another week went by, and he didn't show up. And then more weeks went by, and the deacon said, must have been, we don't know what happened to him. He never came back, must not have taken. We gave him that one verse, but we never seen him again. Months later, he shows back up. And they said, where have you been? He said, I've been establishing a church out in my home village. Well, how could you do that? You don't even have a Bible. He said,